Debt-free living. So my definition is basically living life and financially existing without having the need or the use of external debt, whether it be money that you borrowed from a family member, whether it be credit cards, or whether it be loans, etc. Now, when I speak about debt-free living, and throughout this whole session today, I'm going to eliminate debt-free. I'm going to eliminate mortgage debt. And the reason why is that I would want to tackle that in another scenario or another session or completely separate from debt-free living. I know there are some persons that they don't consider debt-free living to be including mortgage, and there are some persons that they do consider it to be also including mortgage. I will also say that I'm of the firm belief that anyone can own a home, businesses and everything without any use of debt, and that also eliminates mortgage use. But as I said, I'm going to either address that either later if we don't go over the time, or maybe if you have questions, or I'll bring that up in another session. So for the purpose of this, debt-free living is not including your mortgage. What debt-free looks like? It looks like when you're on a positive, like when you have a positive net worth. That means that you don't owe anyone, whether it be Christmas loans, credit cards, payday loans, student loans, medical loans, absolutely zero debt. Debt-free means that you pay cash for all your transactions, or that you actually pay your balances in full at the end of the month. And let me distinguish if you have what's the difference between a balance and what's the difference between debt. If you have debt, like you say credit card debt, it means that you're going to be paying that gradually as months go by. It's not something that you pay off in full. You pay it until the debt is no longer there and it's completely gone. But you can also have balances while living a debt-free life, and that is that you may accumulate balances on your credit card or whatever during the month, but you pay them off in full at the end of the month, or whenever the payment is due in full. And there's a reason why you would carry balances on your credit card even if you're living a debt-free life, which I do. And one of the reasons is that you can enjoy the benefits of credit card benefits, whether you have like a cashback card, whether you have one that gives you mileage with airplane miles or whatever. That's the point of having a credit card and being able to maximize the benefits of it, but without incurring debt. So that's the difference between having a balance on your credit, let's say having a balance on your credit card, and actually being in debt, or as in credit card debt. Why you would want to live a debt-free life? For me, I think the number one advantage of why anyone would want to live a debt-free life is based on the fact that you enjoy a stress-free life. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can make payments for a particular thing next month, whether or not sleepless nights worrying about if this payment is going to be due in the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks, whether if you lose your job tomorrow, whether or not you're going to be able to pay all the bills that you have to pay, etc. And I think that that's the number one advantage of having a debt-free life. No financial stress. Maybe there are other advantages, but anything that eliminates stress from your life, I think is a advantage. Also, if you look at relationships, whether they're working relationships or personal relationships or whatever, financial strain is one of the biggest strains on these type of relationships. And if you can eliminate that type of financial stress and financial burden, you'll give yourself an advantage in life. You also get to live life on your terms. What does living life on your terms mean? If you decide that you want to take a career break, if you decide you want to switch careers, if you decide that you want to work less hours, if whatever you want to change countries or whatever you want to decide that you want to do, you're more able to do those things, and you probably will feel more inclined and confident to do those things if you don't have a bunch of debt that you're dragging with you. If you get an opportunity to go overseas, but unfortunately you're stretched in the country that you currently live in, and you have a lot of debt, then you already have to start to consider, well, okay, if I take this opportunity, am I able to supply to service myself in the country that I'm living in and still service the debt here, and how do I manage that, and whatever. And I have seen this happen on different areas before. I've seen this happen with someone who went overseas to study. They had a lot of debt in their own country, and it got to the point where they almost was literally bankrupt, because trying to pay the way in the country in which that they were in while studying, and also the debt that they left in their country, it just wasn't adding up. I've seen persons with jobs who struggle as well because they have massive debt in the country that they originally came from, and while they're now living a good life in the country in which they immigrated to, unfortunately they can't really enjoy the benefits of living in that country because all their money need to go back home to pay for the debt that they have that they'd left home. So just living a debt-free life allows you to be able to live life on your terms and be able to take advantages of different types of experience. It also allows you to say no to things that don't bring you joy. And I know that there are persons who will want to say, oh, we have to work, we have to do this, and yes, we have to work, or I don't even know that we have to work. We should earn a living, but there are things that we can say no to if we don't carry debt. And especially when you're in the financial sphere, as I am, senior accountants will tell you there comes a point in time in your career where you really have to look at yourself and make a decision of whether or not this is the person that you are. You look at the company that you're working for, you're saying, no, this is not who I am, this is not what I want to do. And when you live a debt-free life, then a lot of things become clearer to you because you don't have to worry whether or not you could feed yourself or your family next week, or whether or not you're going to be able to pay for your living expenses and stuff like that. You can make a decision that this does not sit well with me, this is not who I am, this does not buy into the standards of which I set for myself, and debt-free living allows you to be able to do that. It allows you to also change course or pivot course. Again, you may buy into a particular career at a certain age, and you get to another age and you decide, hey, you know what, this may not be exactly what I want for myself. I want to be able to pivot and make a new career change. And if you want to pivot and make a new career change and you're not carrying that excessive amount of debt, then you can say to yourself, okay, well, you know what, I'm not carrying excessive amounts of debt. I want to no longer be in the career of which I am. You may have some money saved and whatever, you can maintain yourself for a year or 2 years or whatever it takes for you to go back to school or whatever the situation is, and you're able to do that. Unfortunately, some people get stuck in careers because they have so much debt that they're carrying. The option of being able to say, well, you know what, I've done this is what I wanted to do when I was 14 or 15 years, but at this point in time, this is not the career that I want for myself anymore. And a debt-free lifestyle, as I said, it gives you more options, and these are just some of the options of which you can partake in when you're not carrying excessive amounts of debt. It allows you to be able to manage life emergencies. What do we consider life emergencies? COVID. Yes, COVID has hit everyone, and I know there are a lot of people out there who've lost their jobs and are struggling and whatever, but there are a lot of persons out there who are living blissfully well in between this whole COVID scenario. And it's not about a luck and chance and stuff like that. There are some persons who've just been saving and making decisions their whole life for an event like COVID, not knowing that it was going to be COVID. Now, the thing is that even if you've lost your job in between COVID or whatever, and you're not carrying amounts of debt, your situation may not be in as dire a strain as someone who was carrying excessive amounts of debt, because that person now is in a panic of whether or not they're going to be able to pay their mortgage or pay their rent or they for their car, whether or not they're going to have to move out, whether they have to move in with family, whether they can continue to afford the children can go to pay for school fees and all that kind of stuff. If you were someone who've lost your job but you were literally debt free, then there's a level of burden that doesn't sit with you, because yes, well, you still need a job to maintain yourself, or you still need revenue coming in to maintain yourself. It's not as in dire strait as the person who is carrying all of that amount of debt. The scenario is that if you were debt free and you were to go there and have a side hustle or some part-time type of job, and you're able to earn $100 today or whatever, without carrying that excess debt or in a panic of not being able to know how you're going to pay that debt, that $100 can put food on your table. And that's one of the biggest differences between carrying debt, carrying excessive amounts of debt, carrying no debt, and going into a life emergency or a pandemic like COVID. Even if it wasn't COVID, and let's say it was, you came up with a health challenge where you're no longer able to work, etc. That, I mean, we would hope that you have some type of life insurance or some type of other insurance that would kick in. But that's another scenario where, if you are carrying excessive amounts of debt, then the situation looks a lot different. The situation also looks a lot different that even if you are carrying amounts of debt and somehow you end up with a health challenge that has either eroded your insurance that you have, or you don't have that level of insurance and you need to fund operations or whatever the scenario is. If you are already carrying debt, then you're in an impossible situation. But if you are not carrying debt, at that point in time, if it comes down to a life and death, you can actually take on take on debt. So that's another one of the situations I would consider to be life emergencies. Why we want to live a debt-free life? To avoid the cost of debt. Not only is it the interest rates that come with the cost of debt, but there are also the conditions. Anytime you take on debt or you take on money from an outside source, you are subjected to whatever requirements that outside source asks you to basically to comply with. If you have a mortgage, if you have credit cards, you have to pay them, you have to pay the interest. Even if you borrow money from a family friend, there are some level of conditions that come, a family member or a friend, there are some level of conditions that come with that. And as long as you are in debt to someone, it really means that you are in debt to that person, and you have to carry out the conditions of which that person have loaned you that money. So it's not only the interest rate that you're asked to pay back, but there are also conditions that come with borrowing money. And one of the reasons why you simply want to live a debt-free life, simply because you don't like owing people money, and that's enough reason. And also, living a debt-free life allows you to, what I consider to express a level of gratitude, and that is that you understand where every dollar comes from. You understand the amount of effort it takes to earn every dollar, and you understand that when you spend that money and that you're putting it in the areas that you really enjoy and the areas that you really get out of life, it brings a level of gratitude. Am I saying that people who are deep in debt or whatever don't express gratitude or don't appreciate what they have? They do, but there's a difference when you don't think about just flashing your credit card and you're just like, oh, that looks nice, that looks pretty, let me just flash my credit card. And it's a difference when you look at it and you say, okay, well, I can't afford that. No, let me save up and come back to buy this. Because at that point in time, sometimes you realize, you know what, I don't even really like it that much to want to spend the money on it. So it brings you a level of gratitude where you understand and you have time to really stop and think about the money that you earn and whether or not you want to really take your hard-earned money and do the things that you're doing with it, or spending the money that you want to spend in the areas that you're spending it in. Disadvantages of debt-free lifestyle living, I'll say none. Just like how I said for frugal, to me they're none. However, to be balanced, debt-free living, you sometimes take longer to get exactly where you want to go. And as I said, even though I'm not going to open up the whole can of worms on mortgages, even if you look at mortgages, even if you look at travel, if you look at going to school to further your education, etc., if you're going to fund these things entirely by cash, it's no longer a fast fix. Sometimes these are scenarios that you have to save for years in order to get there. And some persons do consider that to be a disadvantage. But again, it's only a disadvantage if you, depending on your mindset of how you want to approach it and how you look at it. And when I get further down and start to talk about how you actually go about living a debt-free life, then you'll see what I mean when I said it depends on your mindset and how it comes and how it come about. Because these are scenarios, sometimes these are scenarios that you know are going to happen in the future. You know you're probably going to have to change your car. You know you may want to go on a holiday. So instead of waiting for it to happen at that point in time, and then you're trying to say, okay, where do I get the money from, etc., etc. If you're planned ahead, then it's not necessarily a disadvantage because, you know, it takes the time to get there because you knew that this thing was going to happen when it was going to happen. Another disadvantage, if I'm going to be balanced, I would say is missed opportunities. And I'm going to share a story with this missed opportunity scenario. And when I say missed opportunities, I mean that someone will say, oh, if I don't have the money in my hand right now, or because I didn't have this money in my hand right now and I don't want to take on debt, I've missed the opportunity to purchase something, or I've missed the opportunity to go this place, or I've missed the opportunity to do this and whatever. Nothing in life is ever really a missed opportunity. Because the reality of it is that at that point in time, it may not have been the right timing for you. The other side to that as well too, is that if you're living a frugal lifestyle and you are saving your monies and stuff like that, these are areas that I covered in the last live session, then really and truly living a debt-free life doesn't mean that you don't have money. Living a debt-free life means that you're not taking on debt to do what you're doing, but you will still have money. So it's not necessarily a missed opportunity. But what I will say as well about this missed opportunity, many years ago, I think I was probably maybe like 23 years or so, I had got accepted to a university in the UK to do a master's. And at the time, I was open to taking on funding to do it. And I had applied to actually get a loan to go overseas to do this master's, etc. And I was turned down. I didn't qualify for the loan. And I started to pivot, and I was like, okay, so if that isn't going to happen, then what I'm going to do or whatever. And a lot of the plans that I had for myself at that point in time was pinned on the fact that I was going to go overseas and do a master's, etc. So I decided to pivot, continue to work, do whatever I was doing. I was always a saver. I've been a saver from the time I was a child. And I decided then that what I would do is that I would save the money in order to go and do this master's. About 2.5 years after that, 3 years maximum after that, I actually got a job overseas. So I ended up then leaving to go overseas to work. And which means then that the truth is that at that point in time, if I wanted to do the master's, I could then start to fund the master's out of my pocket. So that was what I said then that I'll do. I'll go overseas, I'll work, and I'll continue to fund, and I'll continue to save the money then to fund the master's then out of my pocket. Now, there are a couple of scenarios which to this day, I'm still very, very glad that I was actually turned down. One, in between that time, the governments had changed a lot of their policies, etc. A lot of these overseas international destinations. And before, when you were allowed to at least work for a year or 2 years in the country after you would finish your master's. Now, by that time, that policy had already went through the chute. And I saw then a lot of persons who would have gone to do their masters and stuff who were hoping that they would at least be able to stay on and work for a year or two, then didn't have that as an option and ended up returning home with these massive student debt. The thing with me then is that once I had eventually then saved the money to do a program then that I found that I really had liked more than the original program, I then realized that I didn't actually want to spend my money on a master's. So the scenario is that I felt that my money was better spent taking a year off and going traveling. And to me, today, that's still one of the best decisions that I've ever made. And I don't think that the advantages that I've gained and the experiences I've gained from that year of traveling around the world would have come out from a master's. Yes, theoretically, there are some things that you can earn from a master's, but there's so many opportunities that were afforded to me based on the fact that I'm a world traveler and based on the fact that I have the experience that I have, that I know for a fact a master's would not have been able to do for me. So I just want to share that sometimes when, sometimes you feel a bit downtrodden in your journey where you may think like, oh, I'm missing out all these opportunities, blah, 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 because I'm trying to do it this way and I'm not trying to do it whatever way or whatever. Trust me, it'll work out. Don't, it's just sometimes you go through moments like, don't let a moment of weakness, deter you from the ultimate goal or the ultimate what you've decided is your journey. One of the last disadvantage to debt-free living of what I would say, and I think I alluded to this maybe, I can't remember if I did when I did the budget session or whatever, is that if you live a debt-free life, you pretty much have no credit score. And I know there are some people that panic about the fact that you don't have a credit score, but why do you need a credit score if you have cash? Cash is king. You don't need a credit score. And I think if I look at everyone here, you can see that everyone here is from the Caribbean. And most of the persons who are on these sessions are from the Caribbean. We see a lot of this popping up on our Instagram feed, and we see a lot of this popping up and it's really coming from a more US type scenario where credit score is everything. You have to have this credit score and you have to have the next credit score. Any one of you who've known for a fact that if you've ever been approached or you've gone to approach bankers in the Caribbean or whatever, it does not matter what your credit score is. Your ability to be able to repay, meaning that you have a job that is solid, and in a lot of cases, they're still asking you to guarantee with some level of whether it's cash or house or something they still want to hold as guarantee. So your credit score, yes, while it's being used a lot more in the Caribbean, is not an ultimate all of this to all of that. And a lot of times when we start to see some of this financial data floating about, we need to be able to make certain that we're using this financial data within the territories that we are in. So when people start thinking about credit score, whatever, no, I probably don't have a credit score, and I'm fine with that. But that is just one of the things that you will have to consider if debt-free is for you, or on what level of debt-free is. And I mean, if you do debt-free living in the right way, and you're still frugal and you're living and you're saving your money and whatever, I'm not saying that something, an emergency, a massive emergency may not come up. And as I said, I've explained, what those emergencies are. But the thing about it is that you will also have a track record. And I do believe a track record of saving surpasses any amount of credit score that you can have. The characteristics of a debt-free living person. What does a debt-free living person look like, sound like, and behave like? Now, a debt-free living person for sure needs to be non-materialistic. And that is, there's only, I mean, unless you are one of these ultimate billionaires or even multi-millionaires out there, you have limited amount of revenue coming in at this point in time, even if you're going to grow that in the future. So in saying that, there are only ever so much that you can do with your revenue. And if you are someone who really wants to secure your future financial independence, etc., secure your children at a later date, etc., then you want to make certain that you're saving and investing, etc., and all of that while you're also still living. And doing that on your revenue and still being able to go out and buy all the things that you absolutely don't need will not work. If you're someone who you kind of lack self-confidence, because I would say that that's the next characteristics of persons who are able to live this lifestyle. And when I say I lack self-confidence or you're not confident in yourself, you have to be able to drive the car that you drive at the age that it is, and you are very comfortable with that. You have to be able to have friends who at this point in time may be able to afford more or spend or appear to be able to afford more and spend more and be comfortable and confident in who you are as a person, as in this is your lane, this is your phase of life right now, and this is what it is. You must also be disciplined. And this goes back to shopping and buying and being able to work towards your goals and know that you're working and not derailing yourself by you having one bad day and then you're deciding to go online or swiping your credit card or whatever because you had one bad day and you no longer care, etc., etc. So you just derailed yourself 5 months of work down the road. Debt-free living, again, authentic living. And I brought this up in frugal as well, so I'm not going to go and trash it out again. You can always go back to frugal living when I talk about authentic living, and these are the things that, you make certain that you're spending your money in the areas that bring you joy and not the areas that anyone else will think will bring you joy. How to live a debt-free life, budgeting and planning. Again, I had a whole session on budgeting, so I'm not going to open up that whole can of worms again. But pretty much every session that I do, you will hear me speak about budgeting because you are not going to financially get where you want without a budget. I've said it and I'm going to keep saying it and I'm going to keep saying it. Budget, budget, budget. You have to have a budget. Planning is one that I also add in there. I speak about planning a lot too, but maybe not as much as budgeting. I do have an article on the website about planning. But why you need to be really a planner and make certain that you get into planning. And planning is one of those things that as you start to do it more and more and more different areas of your life, you start to get better at it till it becomes second nature. So yes, you may have a big plan at the beginning of this month and you have a nice meal plan and your grocery bill is going to be this and whatever, and somewhere in between there you get sick, a family member gets sick, something happens at work and everything gets derailed and whatever. And there are ways that you're going to be able to put in contingencies that to deal with that. But the scenario is that you still have to have a plan. You just can't keep winging it. And the scenario is with debt-free living is that why you must put those plans in place is that you need to know when you have these expenses coming up. You need to know when you need to spend this money. You need to know what is going to happen in another year or two from now and be able to put plans in place to know that when this expense come up or when this event occurs that you actually have money to do it and not be a deer in headlights like, oh, it's Christmas, I need to buy gifts. We all know it's Christmas. Christmas comes once a year. How don't you not know that? And these are things as in debt-free planning. And when you don't have these plans in place and you don't start to think about these things, what is going to happen is that you're going to go and look for debt. You're going to pull out that credit card. You're going to go get paid a loan. You're going to go and do whatever you want to do to be able to get to satisfy whatever goal or payment or whatever you need to do. How you live debt free, you have to have emergency funds, you have to have sinking funds. Again, I'm not going to go into those in full details because I had those discussed in the budgeting live session. You can go back to that. But pure and simple, you must adult. In order to live a debt free life, you must adult. You must know that you have a car, it is going to need insurance once a year. You know when that insurance is due. The car needs maintenance. It needs to have a service every year. Your car is over a certain age, which means something may happen to it, as has happened to mine this month. You may need new tires. And these are things that you have to know. These are things that you have to put money aside on a monthly basis, or depending on how you fund your emergency funds, because you could probably be doing it quarterly or however you fund them. But the thing is that in between your budgets, you need to know that you have these expenses coming up and you need to have them planned. If you don't have them planned, again, then you're going to have to look for debt to service them. Set long-term goals. This goes back to, these longer or bigger purchases. You may not be renting, or you may be living at home, or whatever your circumstance is, and you're saying to yourself, I know I want to move out. I know I want to, whether you're living at home, you want to move out, or whether or not you're living in rented accommodations and you're saying, okay, I want to purchase a house. Or you may be right now in your house, but it's a smaller house, and you probably want a bigger house because you're going to have a family or whatever. You need to get a new car, or you want to further your edge, whatever the situation is. You have to have a long-term plan in order to be able to do that. So you don't get up next year and then realize, oh, I have a child who's starting school and I want to be able to fund this child through a private school or for extra lessons or whatever. These are things that you need to know prior, and some of them are things that you're going to have to need to know, maybe not the week before, not the month before, maybe a year before, maybe sometimes 2-3 years before. Again, life happens. Sometimes, you may be saving for a particular scenario, and then you get further down and you've changed paths, or you've changed your mind or whatever, and that's fine. You get extra money. You can put it towards something that you really want to at the point in time. But you must be able to set those goals and work towards those goals and have your financial plan pointed towards those goals. Debt-free living. Increase your revenue and streams of income. I think at some point in time I'm going to break out this and probably do a live session specifically on increasing your revenue and how you go about increasing your revenue, because the fact remains is that we cannot continue to live on the revenue which we were living on, regardless whether it is last week or last month. I think it was last week, I posted a few headlines of some articles in different countries, and I would say in the next 6 months for sure, we are all going to see the increases coming in the supermarket bill, and is inevitable. There's nothing anyone can do about it. In terms of the increases, there's nothing the governments can do about it. It is what it is. I think if we've been not sleeping under a rock for the last year, we knew that this was going to happen. There are a lot of crops that have not fared as they should have in the last year, and etc. And the raw materials and all of that is the reason why food has become more expensive around the world. And you're gonna have to figure out how are you going to counteract that. I did a few options, I think, on the Instagram page a couple of days ago, of the different areas of how you could try. You could try to grow your garden. You could try to start your garden, increase your garden. You could move other monies from other areas that you had on your budget. Scenario is you may need to increase your revenue. And even if you are in a steady, stable job, your job, unless you're moving like positions or stuff like that, you will probably get maybe a 2-3% in terms of what the inflation is. And the country that you're living in, the inflation rate is probably double that now. And even if the inflation rate is that, then it only counters the slight increases, but it really doesn't give you an increase in your salary or in your revenue. So at some point in time, in order to keep pace with the increases of life, you're going to have to increase your revenue, or look for different streams of revenue. And that's the only way you're going to be able to continue to afford a debt-free life. And I especially want to say that for like maybe persons who are, let's say, about 50s right now, maybe going into 60s, because this is something I've seen in that age bracket, where at that point in time they're kind of steady in their jobs, they're stable, they're not interested, most persons aren't interested in any upward mobility, they're on their way out, etc. But the inflation rates of the countries are really eroding their lifestyle of what they're used to. And then sometimes when persons get to retirement, then they realize, the whole retirement and not having enough money to retire is one thing. But even on a day-to-day basis, then they realize I can retire, but I can't retire at the lifestyle I'm used to, because my supermarket bill is now 15% more than what it was 5-10 years ago, and I'm on the same salary. And it also happens with a lot with pensioners as well too. And that's one of the drawbacks, while we're talking so much about retirement these days and making certain that you have that, not only you have a retirement fund, because you can have a retirement fund, and most persons in jobs have retirement funds, but the retirement funds are just not enough for you to retire these days. And that, as I said, that's another topic that I may bring into in a different equation when we start to talk about investing in retirement and how much money you really need to retire, etc. Like that. How to live a debt-free, continuing on from that. Pretty much you don't buy ish that you don't need. And that is it. There's only ever so much money that you have in your pocket. You live a debt-free life by buying the things that you absolutely need, the things that bring you joy, the things that you want, not things to just put in the corner and create dust. Increase your financial knowledge. And it's shocking to me sometimes, I think in the last year, when I discovered that there are a lot of persons out there deep in credit card debt, and a lot of persons who use a credit card every day, but they don't actually know how credit cards work. And if you're going to live a debt-free life and you're going to avoid debt, you have to know how credit cards work. You have to know how the interest is calculated. You have to know things like when you do these cash withdrawals and stuff like that, how you're selling your soul to the devil. And I covered a bit of that, I think maybe in budgeting, but I also have some memes or some stuff that I posted a while back on this whole credit card thing that you can also read up on. You need to also learn how to use credit cards for your benefit, but without the added debt of it, which I alluded to earlier, that you can use them to get cash back or airplane miles or whatever the scenario is. Pay off the balances at the end of every month, make certain that there are no interest, absolutely, but you've earned the benefits from it. And in order to do that, you need to understand how credit cards work. If you're using your credit card, you have to know when your cutoff date is. If you have a purchase that you don't want this month, make certain you do it after the credit card cutoff date. I do that. I used to do that perfectly fine. You just have to work within the system and know how to do it. And the whole objective is to always make certain that you're going to be able to pay that credit card balance at the end of the month, or whenever the payment is due, before it actually incurs any type of interest. And when I also say increase your financial knowledge as well, one of the other scenarios in between taking on debt that I also recognize with persons is that persons sometimes sign loan agreements, especially with payday type loans, etc., and they don't actually really fine print. Or sometimes they do read it, and because it's written in so much legal jargon, they don't actually know what they're signing away, or what they're actually agreeing to. And that's another thing about taking on debt, especially when you're not financially as knowledgeable as you should be. A lot of times you are really creating issues for yourself without even knowing that that's what you're doing. You're just under the assumption, well, I'm going to get this little loan, I'm going to put this on my credit card, and I'm going to pay it off here or whatever. And you find yourself strapped because you didn't really fine print, or because you didn't understand the fine print. How do you live a debt-free life? Back to frugal living. There's a whole session on that. You can follow up on that. And you also need to get to the point where you embrace the joy of living without spending money. There are many things in life that you can do without spending money, and there are many things that you can do without spending lots of money or minimum amounts of money. And you just have to get to the point in your life where you are willing, or you understand, and you actually enjoy doing things that just don't cost money. And that's what it is. Frugal living is about being able to pay cash for the things that you want. If you can't pay cash for something, it means you can't afford it. And you have to come to that realization. You have to be able to say to persons around you, well, I've burst through my entertainment budget already for the month, so no thanks. Y'all can go enjoy yourself. I'll catch up with you next month. Yeah. You want to travel this year? Fine, you can travel this year, as long as you can fund that travel exclusively by cash. And that is that when that credit card bill comes home after you get that, after you come back from that trip, you don't open up that credit card bill and you look at it and then you start to panic, and then you're going through line by line saying to yourself, oh my, what has happened? No, you go on travel knowing, or you go on your trip, your vacation, knowing fully well that you've already funded this trip. So when that bill does come in, it's only a matter of paying it off. Can you travel completely debt-free? I've traveled completely debt-free for over 20 years. You can. I've traveled the whole world debt-free. You can. If you don't have money in your travel budget, then you can't go. It's simple as that. And the debt-free lifestyle, a lot of persons say, oh, it's impossible, and it's not for everyone. I will say it's not impossible. There are several persons who've lived their free lifestyle the whole lives. It didn't have a fancy name attached to it. I will also say that it is for everyone. And what I want to say is that for persons who look like me, for persons who look like you, there was a point in time where the countries that we live in, we couldn't even go to approach a bank to ask to borrow money merely from the color of your skin. You were not entitled or allowed to be able to take on debt. And at that point in time, your grandparents, your great grandparents, and everybody found ways in which it means to live on what they had, and they were able to live a debt-free lifestyle. Yes, there are some persons who would say, yeah, but there was still debt on a different level, like you could trust something from the shop. Yes, you could trust something from the shop until you get paid, but trusting something from the shop until you get paid and then taking on $50 or $60 or $70,000 in debt for a car or for travel or for whatever is not the same scenario. And they made it work. That was something then that came into the equation, and all of a sudden, everybody was entitled and thing. If you really understand the makeup of debt and who actually benefits from all this debt that is surrounding the world, even all the countries that are completely in debt now and even more in debt because of COVID and the amount of money they're spending, then you will really understand that debt is really nothing for the average man to aspire to. There are persons who would say, and again, it's one of these things that I feel like it has come from an international direction more into the Caribbean context, because these were things that we didn't grow up with. If you were over a certain age, you didn't grow up knowing persons who were deep in debt. You didn't grow up with debt being the number one choice to earn and to gain anything in life, or to make your way in life. You grew up with persons working hard and saving money, whether it was by the bank or a piggy bank, or some persons put their money in susus, or whatever the scenario is, susu meaning a meeting term, or whatever the scenarios were at the point in time. But the first option was not to go and take on debt. So when persons say, it's impossible to live a debt-free life, we came from a debt-free life. And I personally feel that's where we need to go back to, whether it's completely 100% debt-free, or whether it is minimum debt, or debt that you know for a fact that you can easily manage. And when I say debt that you can easily manage, for example, if you had a few little pieces of debt you were carrying and you lost your job tomorrow, but you had enough money that saved that you could say, okay, well, you know what? I'm comfortable in paying off this, so I don't have any debt. I'm still in the black or whatever, then that is what I consider to be manageable. And that's where we came from. And I personally think that that's where we should aspire to go back. All the advantages that persons put out there about having debt, or why you should carry debt or some level of debt, actually don't amount to anything, in my opinion. They're so minor, and they don't actually add value to life that it really isn't considered to be worth it. But as I said, there are certain characteristics of which you yourself will really have to start to think about who you are and what you want as in your mindset, and what you're hoping to achieve to be able to live this type of lifestyle.